Hello there and welcome back to another review. Today we're going to be having a look at another classic Studio Ghibli movie, and that is Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind. As I say, I've got my Studio Ghibli box set here. I will be trying to get through as many of the Studio Ghiblis as I can, but today we're going to be having a look at the classic, the ultimate classic, that is Nausicaä of the Valley of the Wind, made in 1984. Even though the film was actually sort of made before sort of Ghibli were established as a company, the film is very much considered a Studio Ghibli piece of work and directed by the absolute genius that is Hayao Miyazaki, based on his manga of the same name. Absolutely wonderful film, absolutely brilliant in every sense. I know I mentioned like in my previous Ghibli review for Kiki's Delivery Service, that was, you know, one of my favourites. Nausicaä as well is very, very high on my list of favourite Ghiblis. I mean, like I've mentioned, they're all good. Every Ghibli film, there's no Ghibli film that is sort of, you can say, oh, that's rubbish. It's impossible to say. You just cannot do that. Some of them are not as good as others, but Nausicaä especially is definitely on the high end, and it's definitely one of the classics, one of the better ones, and just an absolutely subliminal film in every sense. The film is very highly ranked and highly regarded. There's a good reason for this, as the film, as I mentioned, is just from start to finish, it's a real tour de force of like animation, filmmaking. Just everything about it is just absolutely just 10 out of 10. Production, everything just works, everything comes together. Initially Miyazaki found it difficult, as he only had like 16 chapters of the manga to work with, but by sort of refocusing the narrative, and he was able to do so, he was able to make the film. Oddly enough, initially he didn't want to make a film, but agreed to on one condition, that he could sort of direct it. I think to this point he'd only I think the only one he'd done was Castle of Cagliostro. I think that was the only one, like the Lupin the Third movie, which is again one of my, I absolutely love that film. I will try and get round to reviewing that as well at some stage. But I think he'd only sort of got one sort of motion picture credit to his name at this point. But he sort of, you know, I can make a film, but I want to direct it. He'd only really directed, I think, just one, film at that point. So the whole film is basically a post-apocalyptic, setting. So it's already sort of much darker type of film to what we come accustomed to in sort of other Ghibli films that followed after that point. Not to say some Ghiblis don't have sort of a darker theme to it, but I mean the idea of this is set in like a post-apocalyptic world, that very sense that humanity sort of crumbled. It's very different to sort of what you would maybe necessarily come to expect with that Studio Ghibli world and that Studio Ghibli sort of setting that we sort of come to know. It can be looked at as sort of like a steampunk or even a diesel punk when it comes to seeing sort of the technology used here. I think it's maybe verging on towards more steampunk. I'm sure some of you out there may correct me on that, but the idea of steampunk, diesel punk, that is very much sort of here, like I say, in regards to vehicles, technology, that is used with vehicles and so forth. Lot of themes with this one. There's a lot of current undercurrent themes that are running throughout the narrative for the movie, that are all sort of subjects and topics that they sort of intertwine with each other as the film progresses, such as like anti-war, the fear of the unknown. Is it easier to destroy than to understand something? Respecting nature, respecting your environment, not taking things like that for granted. So there's a lot going on here in the narrative. I think the film's roughly about 1 hour 50 or 2. I think it might be actually 2 hours. I can't remember. There was a butchered version of this film called Warriors of the Wind, released in the mid-80s, which Miyazaki hated. And from that on, he insisted that nobody, if they're going to release his film sort of internationally or in different countries, they're not allowed to cut it. It's got to very much be as the film was originally thing, because this film, Warriors of the Wind, was completely and utterly butchered from what the original Nausicaä, was meant to be. So, like I say, from that point on, he insisted, like, you're not cutting my films. The film has received so much acclaim. Final Fantasy series and the Panzer Dragoon series of video games drew heavily from this. Even Rey from Star Wars is said to be somewhat influenced by Nausicaä. The score, the message, the plot, everything about it works. Everything about this film works. So, we'll be getting into the sort of why this film is amazing today. So 1,000 years after the collapse of civilization, a forest with toxic vapours called the Sea of Decay covered the earth. We meet Princess Nausicaä, whose heart is always in the right place, and a real fantastic role model as well for young children, especially young girls, a real sort of somebody they can aspire to be, because she's strong, she's passionate, she's always wants to do what's right. You know, she's a very, I wouldn't say headstrong, but she's very sort of what she believes, and when she believes something, she believes that is right. You know, she gets on with everyone. She can mend things. She's an animal lover, so you can sort of see where people get that similarity with sort of Rey from the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Lots of bugs and insects in this film. It's not like you would get in sort of like a classic Disney film back in the day. I mean, some of these creatures, for especially like young viewers, might be a bit sort of scary. Probably not nowadays, but you know, back in the day, you know, you're watching this if you're quite young, it might be a bit sort of, okay, the creatures are a bit frightening in this. We meet her as sort of like she's foraging, and she hears these gunshots in the distance. And I love the sense of freedom with her on the glider, and there are these big creatures called like ohms. And I love that first action scene where she is steering her glider and the ohm comes out of the forest and the music kicks in, and you really do get like Miyazaki just getting that action scene, you know, in place right away to show there will be action in this movie. And it's great the way, if you watch that scene, the way the ohm just comes out of the forest and the way the music kicks in, and she's just trying to steer it somewhere safe. The movie has the right balance of everything. She calms it down sort of using flares and returns to the forest. Then she meets Lord Yupa, who gives her like this fox like squirrel who takes to her right away. I mean, after biting her, of course. I mean, this thing sinks its teeth right into Nausicaä, but eventually they become friends and it's all chill. I really do like the post-apocalyptic setting here. It's a lot bleaker than I've mentioned before, than some of Miyazaki's and Studio Ghibli's other works. So Lord Yupa comes to their village, and it's the ocean winds that is sort of protecting them from sort of the Sea of Decay. He is looking for a way to the Pure Lands that are said to be like a myth, and there is this prophecy in this film, which is what I love about the opening credits. You get this history, you know, sort of it's almost in a way akin to sort of something like The Legend of Zelda. You get this prophecy and what happened before in that opening credit scroll, which really does work without necessarily spoon feeding it to you. It's like, let's just show what happened before, and the idea of this prophecy and this legend. You know, you get the history of what happened. So a ship crashes in their valley, which is being attacked by insects, and Nausicaä finds a princess in the wreckage who asks her to destroy the cargo, and this princess sort of dies. So again, quite dark, quite bleak in places. You know, somebody's just died after her ship's basically been, you know, sort of attacked and whatever, but she ends up dying. She's like, please destroy the cargo, what's on board? And at this point you're not sure what is on board, you're not sure, you know, why is this ship crash, what's gone on, you crashed into our village. At one point to get rid of one of these insects, she does like a Mick Dundee, like from Crocodile Dundee thing, where she's sort of swinging this thing round and round to sort of like distract it, to sort of calm the creatures. So she's got even a Mick Dundee vibe going on, such are the talents and skills of Nausicaä. So the village burns. The villagers, they burn the spores to stop like any infections that have gone into their village. And we learn that the monsters from the old world are all meant to be like dead, except like one. And these were like these giant, great big titans, these great big like huge monsters. And there's apparently meant to be only one left that sort of that they found. Who like sort of slept beneath the earth. Then the evil Talmiki of military land, and they kill her father. Now, in a fit of rage, Nausicaä actually attacks and kills some of the soldiers here. She murders people in this film. It's not shown outright, but it's quite obvious she's killed these people, because like they've killed her father. She just sees blind rage, and she actually kills some of the Empire's actually sort of soldiers and henchmen. So again, this isn't necessarily a kids' film per se, although it, you know, can be viewed as one. There's definitely, you know, the idea the main character has just killed, like taken human life to get back at people that have taken her father away from her is very interesting. It's very thought-provoking that Nausicaä does have this side to her where she does go into sort of a blind rage if somebody she knows and loves is hurt or, you know, God forbid, like killed. So the fact our heroine has just committed murder is interesting. Really, like she will sacrifice life if they have taken life away from her. Basically, they have got their hands on this last monster, and they want the village to submit to them, as they believe they can destroy the Sea of Decay with this resurrected monster. They're naive. They think if we use this monster from the old world, it will destroy the Sea of Decay, so all will be right, and we can follow us in this new land, and like stick with us, and we'll steer you to glory, basically. So Yupa finds Nausicaä at this point, where she's been growing plants that if grown right in soil and water, they are fine, and that the pollution basically is just in the earth. That's what we come to learn. Like, Nausicaä basically has these plants and they're fine. And there's a really interesting bit here where she cries and she says, "I'm frightened of my rage." Which is it. I love that they acknowledge the fact she has killed some people, and that it's not just okay, that's fine in this film, that she can just like kill people. I love the fact that she acknowledges that I'm frightened of what I've just done. I'm frightened that when I get upset, that's the kind of person I become. She has taken lives of others, and how passionate she feels when there's something unjust going on. So Princess Kushana leaves with Nausicaä and some other hostages. Not sure why she is doing that. I'm not sure why, like, the princess from the Empire is taking these hostages. She just says, "Come with us," even though they're sort of setting up base, sort of Nausicaä's, in the village, where they're attacked by this. So she takes these hostages, but they're attacked by a Pejite gunship. Nausicaä says no more, and the pilot sees her sort of all in white. They're sort of being attacked. She's sort of like, "Come on, stop shooting at us," because he thinks it's just the Empire. She doesn't realise there's hostages. He doesn't realise there's hostages on board. She takes glider down as sort of the ship explodes, and her and this other guy they all sort of land in this Ohm's nest. Nausicaä goes to rescue the young pilot who was attacking the Empire's ship. And both land in like quicksand, but slip through, and they go like beneath the earth, where they find there is no poison and it's breathable. And it turns out he is the brother of the princess who died earlier in the movie, so they've got that connection going there. Here we get a flashback of like a younger Nausicaä trying to protect a baby Ohm when she was younger, so she's getting across that sense. She doesn't want, even though her, like, the humans and the insects and the creatures are just, it's not working. She's still like, it's still life. It flashes back to her trying to protect this young one. So Lord Yupa spies on the enemy growing like a giant monster in their village, and is told that Nausicaa's ship has crashed. It turns out some spores in the village survive, so the villagers all get their burning tools back. Yupa goes to find Princess Nausicaä, and she and the boy return to Pejite and find it sort of destroyed, as they sort of have lured in insects to destroy the enemy. Like, they've just lured in the insects on purpose to sort of wipe out their enemy, even though it's sort of caused so much destruction in the process. It finds out these groups of people, they're going about it the wrong way as well. You got these two different. You got the Empire and like the Pejites. They are not. They're both going about it wrong. The way they're doing it is just causing more destruction and more death and more loss. So turns out, like I say, so the villagers have they get their burning tools back. They return to the Pejite and finds it sort of destroyed. They lured in insects, as I mentioned. Something they want to keep doing as well. They want to keep making sure that this is the way to sort of get out of this. So they're taken in the Pejite ship, and she is able to escape with the help of the mum of the princess, and she is able to get out of the princess who died earlier. Lord Yupa gets on the ship for a bit for some swordplay. I'm not sure if you ever see him after this until the end of the movie. He gets on the ship, he sort of helps out, and then sort of you're not sure how he gets to sort of back in the village of the wind at the end, but it just turns out he gets a bit of swordplay. Then he sort of you're not quite sure actually what happens to Lord Yupa at this point. So Nausicaä returns to villages and sees like her villages and sees some people baiting in the Ohms with like a wounded baby Ohm. Nausicaä approaches unarmed and gets shot. She gets shot and lands. She doesn't want, why, like, they're sacrificing this baby Ohm to sort of lure in all these other Ohms to sort of destroy the Empire. She begs the Ohm to stop moving, or it will bleed to death. Even at one point putting her foot in the lake of poison to stop it going in. So they get the Ohms get like blinded by their rage. This is the thing. The Ohms, the idea is that they will just keep going. they will not settle. Once they're in a blind bit of anchor, they do not see, because obviously this baby Om is hurt. Nausicaa's trying to say, look, you know, even going so far as to putting her foot into this burning, like, poisonous water to say, look, stop, you don't want to go in there. She's trying to care for this creature because he's, like, so used to, like, what's just happened before with these people just injuring him and using him as bait to lure these other Oms in. See, they get, like, blinded by their rage. So this is, like, luring in the big, huge Oms. And even a scene where one of the kids says to, they say, there's loads of them coming the way towards the village. And there's a really heartbreaking moment where, like, one of the kids says to a Baba, who's sort of this sort of mystic or the local fortune teller, she says, like, are we going to die? And like, she says back to the little girl, if that's what, you know, if that's what's going to happen, then we must accept it. You know, it's that real, this is, you know, you can't, it's really, you really are thinking, okay, that's it, we're just, you know, going to die, because you've sort of, like, accepting your fate, you know, accepting what is going to happen, accepting the fact that, you know, this might be the end, you know. And Nausicaa's, as all, like I've said before, is trying to do the right thing, is trying to get everybody safe and to make sure this doesn't happen, these creatures don't, like, destroy her village. Very dark in its nature with that scene. So Shana unleashes, like, this giant monster which is not ready, and it just crumbles, and Princess stands there with the baby Om and gets sort of run over in the horde. Eventually she calms down and, like, changes to, like, blue. And she basically, they go over her. She's got the baby Om. They charge into her, and they end up resuscitating the princess. And because of her, like, her dress being drenched in the Om blood and their golden sort of tentacles, as though going through, like, golden fields. This is like the prophecy that was depicted in the village of this, like, person in this sort of colour garment going through these golden fields, which here are depicted as, like, the Om's tentacles and things like that. So it's that element of, like, Nausicaa has found sort of salvation for these people, that there is hope, and it, like, that finally things may start changing for the better. Maybe this is the prophecy coming true. You know, golden field, like, the legend coming actually to fruition. And end of the film, we see them rebuilding the Ptolemaic Empire, like, leaving their village, and we, at the very last shot of the movie, we get this, like, non-toxic plant beneath the surface to sort this one, like, sort of last steady shot of this plant. So you, like I said, you get the idea that things will be changing, things will be made, you know, for the better. And like I said earlier, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's a lot of themes, a lot of topics and things for, you know, food for thought here in regards to sort of respecting what's around you. And like I say, it's the idea that it's much easier to destroy something than it is to create something. It's much easier to ruin, like, to destroy you know, sort of foundations of something rather than it is to build them. So Nausicaa is very much, I mean, you can look at this film sort of as deep as you want, really. You can look at it as just, like I say, just a good, you know, amazing piece of work from Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli. But there's to say, if you really look at it, I mean, because I've seen it numerous times now, there's just a lot going on with it. There's just a lot going on with it. And like I say, there's a reason why it is so highly regarded and it is considered what like to be an amazing piece of work. I mean, bearing in mind this was, like I say, this was made in 1984 and it still holds up. It still holds up even now. I watched it recently the other week, and it's still an amazing film. It's an absolutely amazing film. And if you're, like I say, if you're new to Studio Ghibli and you've only seen the more obvious, you know, Spirited Away or the Howl Moving Castles, that kind of thing, please check this one out for classic Hayao Miyazaki. As I say, it was made before sort of Ghibli was sort of a thing, but it is very much a Ghibli movie. So I will try and get to all the others. There's loads, as I say, there's quite a few Ghibli movies that I've seen them all, and there's quite a few I've got to get through, but I will be gradually getting through them one by one. So thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the review. Sorry it's a bit rushed here and there at some points, but I just try and get it across as, you know, my review as quick as I can. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.